that's easier. All right, I'll share my screen, see how this goes. All right, whoops. I am well into this. Oh no. Sorry. All right. All right, so James tasked me with this, and it wasn't
That is totally not true.
It wasn't on my radar. I'm in different working groups that are talking about tech transfer of open source, so I'm very concerned about this and sustainability, so this was a really good exercise for me, and I really threw myself into this, and so I do not consider myself an expert on open source business models, but I learned a lot, and I'm going to share what I learned, and I'm happy to have anybody ask questions, interrupt. And I sort of have two tracks. My mind was splintered. One was to focus on students and like how open source can help them as they're navigating trying to get a job in this crazy job market. And then the other is how you can maybe start a company, from open source. And then there's some other tangents and rabbit holes that I go down, but hopefully we'll have fun. And I also leveraged really highly from Sandipin Banerjee, who is a professor at University of Minnesota in their tech transfer office. So most of the actual open source business models are from his work. And so I thank him, and I added one and a half. Okay, let's see. I'll move this all over the place. So I believe that open source is having a big revival. Open source has been around for 30 some years, but I think we're about to enter a new heyday. I'm an optimist. So this presentation is for you if you are worried about getting a job, if you want to make a positive impact in the world, or if you want to be paid fairly and work with great people and do great things. So I think that's, and I'm a firm believer, and I think a lot of people in the room are, open source for the win. So looking at this current job market, I think it's insane. I think it's not sustainable. There's trillionaires or about to be trillionaires, individuals and companies. NVIDIA, $5 trillion valuation company. I hope they'll be a sponsor of our OSCON. And then Elon Musk, about to maybe get $1 trillion if he meets some incentives. And then the job market's crazy. Some of the jobs that you can get in this job market are, in my opinion, not so great. And then I think open source can really be an antidote and come to the rescue here. So I did the math here. Do you guys know? So Elon Musk is supposed to earn $1 trillion payout over 10 years. Do you know how much a day $1 trillion over 10 years works out to be?
A lot.
Yeah. Any guesses?
Probably more than I'll make in my lifetime.
Yes.
Easily.
Yes. So the answer is $270 million per day, including holidays and weekends. So that's 365 days a year. It's actually like $273 million a day. The Tesla board is going to pay Elon, if he meets some incentives, for his part-time job as a Tesla CEO.
Part-time gig.
It's a part-time job because his other commitments include 14 children, SpaceX, Neuralink, XAI, The Boring Company. Gotta put this up the top. Doge. I don't think he's still doing that, but
I love the question mark.
I don't know if he's still working on that. So yeah, I bring this up because I just think that the times that we're in, this level of income disparity is just not sustainable, and something has to give. And I'm hoping more people start leaning into open source as a solution. Oh, the other point I want to make about this is he takes credit for everything, and so the actual scientists, the actual engineers are not getting recognition. And in open source, I feel like that's flipped. People like Tim Berners-Lee, you know about him, even though he's not a trillionaire. And some of the founders of some of the big packages and code and different projects that you like, you might know their names. So the local economy, not so good right now. I really feel for anybody that's looking for a job right now. Doge and all the different cuts have really been hurting things. Globally, we all know what's coming. AI and automation are changing the landscape and replacing jobs. I would remind everybody that I believe one of humanity's superpowers is the ability to adapt. So if you can, now's the time to adapt. Take advantage of that superpower. Learn new skills, just be ready, be flexible.
I don't know if the workforce researcher in the room disagrees with you.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
What's your take?
So automation, much like the introduction of computers and the steam engine, takes away a lot of the lower skill, I hate that term, job, and creates a lot of more opportunities at the higher skill level. Essentially, you no longer have to do the manual data entry, you're answering phone calls, which frees up human capital labor to actually fulfill things that were previously very, very expensive to do. But when labor becomes cheaper, you can actually invest and build skill sets. So
Yeah,
disruptive, not transformative.
the phone calls right off the bat, I'm just thinking of my mom just needs to reach a real person to get an answer. Like, we need people answering phones, I'm sorry. It's like mission critical for like a civilized, humanistic civilization.
I saw that, as I was researching, I saw that, and some people say that, AI and automation might remove 70 million jobs, but add 170 million to the global workforce. So, I mean, we'll see what happens. Either way, it's gonna be disruptive and.
I think the answer is going to be global and not domestic. So the US is poorly positioned, whereas most of the rest of the developed world is well positioned.
Right, China will do well, US will not.
No, China will do worse than the US.
Oh, interesting. All right.
Keep going.
Okay, Elon Musk will have to hire a lot of them if he has 14 kids.
I was trying to look at the job skills. I wanted to make the case that the jobs right now are things like working in the attention economy and doing advertising. But that's not exactly what I discovered. And I think somebody that's more of an expert on the jobs and the skills, it's changing really rapidly. I think is definitely happening. And it's hard to navigate, and different parts of the globe are having different things shaping their economies. So yeah, there's a different set of skills, different types of jobs, some that are going away and some that are not, and new jobs that are happening. Are software developers going away? I don't know, I don't think so. I think a lot of the entry-level jobs might be going away, but I think the need for software engineers is still strong. So I think problem solvers are always going to be important. So it's just maybe having more of those broad level understanding of the skills. So
Nurse practitioners.
yeah, it was fascinating going through this. There's different jobs that are.
The best degree to go into right now is an art degree.
I would love to see some metrics for that I can share with my.
The soft skills, the creativity, the thinking outside the box.
I've been
Those are
hearing that
things that
since the late '90s though, and I haven't seen it actually come to fruition that much.
Problem is, a lot of the skills that get talked about don't crosswalk well. So like when people talk about creativity or those top skills list, the core skills that are important, they miss the soft skill component, which art actually tends to develop much quicker. So I think we should require a couple art classes for every undergraduate.
I like that.
I think
And we can
Columbia,
run.
you have to take a studio class to graduate.
All right, I learned this term. I'm embarrassed that I didn't know about this. Enshittification, a real term coined by Cory Doctorow. It basically means that corporations are incentivized to follow money, and so they will always look for ways to cut costs and make their systems and platforms worse, especially as they become monopolies or they have vendor lock-in. So I believe that open source is an antidote for this. And I'm seeing companies that also believe this. So I'm excited for students and others to have jobs that are making the world a better place, and rather than just trying to chase dollars and actually, making their systems harder and harder to use, and frustrating everybody, and upping the subscription fees, but giving no additional benefits. So open source to the rescue. I'm seeing governments, universities, and industry really moving much more towards open source. And some examples of that are, there's new government laws, even in the US, there's a lot of new government laws and regulations saying, incentivizing at the procurement level to buy open source over proprietary solutions. There's a new law that was passed in December of this past year that says government contractors need to make their things open source. There's no implementation arm of that, so it's a law in writing only, but nevertheless, the words are there when they weren't before. There's countries that are putting incredible effort, like Germany and France and Switzerland, into moving towards open source. And they're doing things like creating Open Libre or LibreOffice as a replacement to Microsoft Office, with the idea that not only will this save their government tons of money when they roll this out for their
It's been out for 20 plus years.
Yes, and it hasn't really been adopted, but now Germany and France are combining as lead maintainers to really improve it. So it hasn't really been competitive. Like, it wasn't something that you could replace easily, but it's moving that direction, and people are starting to adopt it.
I was talking to the European Commission about 3 weeks ago now, in their office in Brussels, and basically their statement was they will not sign any contracts with any commercial producer for anything that can be offered as open source. So literally, if there is a commercial product but no open source, they still won't buy it, they will commission the building the open source version. There are some situations where that can't happen, but generally speaking, that is the goal for the entirety of the EU.
Yeah.
So,
For the EU, it's a lot about sovereignty, and if a company, like, they feel like companies can hold them hostage.
And they do.
Yeah, and so if they use open source, then they are free to to not, it's the vendor lock-in, but in the extreme.
Yeah, Adobe's really, like, just from the art school side, Adobe's really sort of got us in a place, and we just have no control. And I know what it is like the costs are skyrocketing with Adobe because they're building in all these generative AI features which need processing power, and it's like, wait a minute, we don't actually need most of that stuff. And I asked the Adobe rep with Jared Johnson, hey, can we just get it without the AI? And they're like, nope.
that's a pretty common refrain. We've heard this from Microsoft, from Amazon, from a lot of the big producers. They want that AI integration because they know that most people won't use it, but they can charge more for the feature. It's your shitification argument.
Yeah.
Essentially, you can add features that no one wants, increase your price, and no one can say no once you've locked in.
Yep. Awesome. Another thing is popping up, like 5 years ago, there weren't such a thing as an academic OSPO. I think RIT had the only OSPO, and they called it an open work organization. So now there's at least 25 academic OSPOs that I know of, and several more popping up, and others that in Europe, they call them open research offices more than open source offices. So that's a thing that's growing dramatically. I think there's a lot of new open source companies popping up. I'm going to talk about Nava later if I don't run out of time. But they're an open source services company in DC that's been around for 10 years, but they're growing. They're about 500 people now, very solid company. And the United Nations recently has leaned all in on open source. They announced last year open source principles. So they're saying open by default for projects and recommending that for all of their different United Nations offices. And then they're also saying secure by design. So they have a set of, I think, 8 principles that I really like. And they're pushing this across the globe. It's really nice. All right, now I'm gonna talk to the open source business models. Let's just go through them. There's 10 of them. Crowdsourcing and donation model. So this is simply relying on community contributions for development and donations for financial support. So you build a community and they help develop your product and fill in the content, and then donations are how you are funded. Wikipedia is probably the best example of this. Unfortunately, Wikipedia is under fire because AI is scraping it but not paying back, and people aren't going to Wikipedia as much, and they're not donating as much. So it's going to be interesting to see. That's not a sustainable model either. But
I think Jimmy Wales just did a book, because he was like in the press a lot about a month ago, and they were talking about, his, Elon Musk beating up on him and doing whatever his Wikipedia thing is, and yeah, I immediately sent him $100 to Wikipedia.
nice. I saw the New York Times
Yeah.
post. That was
Yeah.
really good.
Yeah.
It was so amazing hearing him talk about trust and how you gain it. And
Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, we need more people like this.
Yeah.
A small comment, the Wikipedia issue actually makes this entire model work. So any publicity is good publicity, even when they're under attack or not, because Wikipedia and Wikimedia in general are in the press constantly. Whereas Apache, which is a similarly high quality institution, I guess, well, you never hear about it. Like Apache has some LibreOffice kind of offshoots that I've used before. It's great open source, but unless you're using it, you don't really know about it. So Wikipedia is successful in one way in this model. They're just having some headwinds, but at the same time,
Yeah.
everyone knows their name.
Yeah. The user base and data model, not my favorite. Leveraging large user bases to collect data for various financial purposes. This is basically the Google model to get everybody's information and then use advertising and whatnot. But you can be done for an open source company or product as well. So that's the shift. This is a good one. Company primary sells hardware, the widget frosting model, and then the software is released open source to enable more hardware sales. So Arduino is the best example of this. They want to lower the barrier of entry, make it really free and easy for anybody to use Arduino, and so they make everything's open source, and then you pay for the little kits and all the little robots and all the things.
They're great.
Yeah, and
They're cheap too, though.
yeah,
So,
yeah. This is a cool model.
Economy of scales.
Yeah. This is a pretty common model, enterprise support model. Company provides support and services for this. It's for their open source software, but I think it can also be for just other open source software. So this is the Red Hat is one of the main examples, and they're doing very well. They make a lot of money with their support and services, yeah, there's lots of other, almost any really good, solid open source product will spawn an ecosystem, and companies will pop up around that will offer support and services, because people want to use it, but they don't know how to host it, they don't know how to run it. So things like Elastic or another, different companies.
This is one of the more common ones for university-based research. So when you create the open source software, put it out in the public, if you want to actually take some level of credit, you can do this, and it gives you an advantage in the market. You designed it, you set it up, so you're the first person people go to. So this is a technology commercialization fast lane.
Yeah. All right, the freemium model. This is when the core features are free, but the advanced features require a paid premium subscription. So Docker and Elastic are 2 examples of this. And yeah, the open source, it doesn't actually have to be open source. It could just be a free license with like limited stuff. In both of these cases, they are open source. But then they have like security layers and other things, like in Elasticsearch's case, it's some proprietary features support, and then a a managed cloud offering, which, and they've started adding AI stuff and to those layers, and it's kind of annoying actually too. The software as a service and the platform as a service through subscription. WordPress is an example of this. I think Drupal might do this as well, but I'm not sure. Dual licensing model. This is another way that research can get involved. So you can have the software available under an open source license, and then maybe have some restrictions that it can't be used for commercial use or something like that. And then you can say, okay, Drew, so if you're a student or if you're a fellow researcher, you can use it open source. But if you're a company and you want to build off of it and make money, then you need to pay for it.
This is still a dangerous model for academics because you need a strong legal team to support this. While you will have altruistic users who will pay your license fee, most users probably will not, even if they use it for commercial, until they get in trouble.
Yeah.
So Oracle being behind MySQL makes that work.
Right.
But if someone like a researcher at university is the only one behind it, it's unlikely that's going to hold up well.
Yeah.
They sue a lot of people.
Yes.
The threat of lawsuit is
I think they
usually
do,
sufficient.
actually.
And I think they do actually go through and
Yeah.
sue larger companies. They tend to let smaller individual users who may have some commercialization go, but you know, the fear of $1 million lawsuit, just the cost of defending it,
Yeah.
with no guarantee you'll ever get a penny back from that defense, prevents people from using it without paying for the license, which is relatively cheap.
So the loss leader model, I'm not super clear on this one, but yeah, a company uses open source software to establish a customer base to sell additional products. So I guess they're losing money on the open source.
The loss leader model is really set up for developing companies with the idea that as you're developing, you get a user base. The user base provides information back as you have investment for future return. So the loss leader is really common in social media and some of the other interactive phases where they create a user base, basically a lock-in effect. You have effectively millions of users who've used it for free, and you add a little premium. Twitter is a very good example of how that would work. They offered everything for free, and then you had to pay for a blue check mark. And then eventually, without a blue check mark, a lot of things were restricted, and so on and so forth. So this happens more and more in a attention economy. At the same time, when you have more and more players in it, it's hard to actually make the loss leader turn into a profitable company.
Thanks.
Slack kind of that too.
Slack had a slightly different model. It was almost a freemium model. So Slack always had premium discussions at the higher license level, but they became more prominent as they started ratcheting down the scale at which you had to pay. So to some extent, they're somewhere between the two, because none of these are unique. You're not going to find a good example that is exactly what you're saying, but you know, shades of gray.
Yeah.
Yeah, Slack is really interesting because they're sort of extorting some organizations where they'll say, oh, you need to pay us now because you're, you know.
Too big.
I mean, kind of,
Yeah.
and they've also taken the approach of, as you were saying, scaling down, like,
And they
they
restricted
just
it.
kept getting more and more instead of adding more features to get people to pay for it, they took the opposite approach of taking away
No,
more
they
and
added
more
features
out.
too, but you could only get to the features at premium. You never got to taste them at the free level.
Yeah,
So like there's some integrations you can do, like GitHub and Slack work together now, so you can get a integration, but that integration is shitty unless you pay for it. Shittification comes back. You know, those types of new cool features that get people locked in. Sorry, I'm not trying to take over.
No, this is great. This is great.
You're just in my wheelhouse.
Perfect.
Whoa.
this is what we want.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you, Mike. Open core model, this is really similar to the freemium model, and I don't actually quite understand how it's different. You have the core software is open source. I guess the main difference is that freemium doesn't have to be open source. I think maybe it's just a terminology thing. People like saying premium.
No, this is distinctly different. So think about it as this being Windows. bad example, but Windows is on every computer. It's highly used, relatively free, it's baked into the price of the computer you buy most of the time, but everyone's utilizing it. But if you want to develop software that uses Windows, they've got all these different requirements, it has to have a license that's approved, and there are barriers to entry. So the open core model is designed for it to be free and easy to use and valuable to a lot of people, but all of the suppliers who want to come into the environment have to pay, or the actual open core developer has their own features that they want to sell out. So you buy it as an a la carte type system. So this is more like a cafeteria model, which is the way I've heard it talked to. So the cafeteria entry is free, but you have to buy all the food. And you can still sit at the table for free, but you can't stay there unless you bought the food.
I see.
You
So,
can't bring your own food in.
Usually correct.
So
Maybe you get a cup of ice water for free.
Yeah.
is that like, I'm just trying to parse this out. The example that comes closest to my mind is like something like Monday where,
Yeah, it's
you know, there are all these other add-ons you can get, but they're like, it's got like a add-on store basically.
Box is another good example. So
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can
yeah.
get a certain amount of storage for Box, but all of the features that you end up using, you have to pay for,
Right.
either through Box itself or through a company that's giving Box a percentage, or the App Store.
Yeah.
App Store is actually probably a really good example. Everything is free on the App Store except for the apps. So
right,
your search functions, all of discovery, all of the reviews and ratings are all free, but you have to pay to download apps that have that expense.
so it'd be like,
That's not a bad model,
It's not.
like even if you think, I'm not saying you should, but like with laser, like,
Oh, we're building this.
because yeah,
This model
you
right
could
now,
see
yeah.
like a lot of people would be like, oh, I could add this cool thing to what you have.
When we're not being recorded,
Yeah.
I'll walk you through how the business model we've been thinking about is gonna go, and it's a sustainability model for open source. It's not, it's a not-for-profit sustainability model, because there's no way we're gonna be able to scale to the point where we can actually turn real profits and
Yeah.
build up huge, but we can bring in enough money to pay for graduate students who can, develop new features, to work with universities and whatnot who wanna set up their own proprietary access points and that kind of thing, and pay for the back-end storage and that kind of thing. But like, most of the academic models will start out with either foundation funding, government funding, or university hard money. And those dry up after a certain amount of time. So you have to have a sustainability model, which is where I would have done the entree to this. These are not how to make money off of open source. It's how to sustain your project and make sure you can eat
yeah.
in the process.
Yeah. Is VS Code like this then, except that they like a plugin would be, but I don't think can you pay for a plugin in VS Code?
So VS Code is mostly a freemium type application, I would say, insofar as almost everything is free and there are premium features and premium plugins you can buy, but those premium plugins I don't think are part of VS Code's business. I think they're essentially just a hanger-on. But
So how does VS Code make money?
I'm not sure they do.
But it's Microsoft, isn't it?
I think Microsoft bought them out.
Right.
So like VS Code is an entree to a larger commercial ecosystem, which is not a model you've talked about yet, so I'm waiting for Ted to say anything.
That is
There you go.
and this is the one I sort of made up because I was surprised it wasn't there. But it's basically, I think, the most common model where a large company open sources one or more products to receive various benefits.
I'd call it the advertising model.
It can be advertising, it can be money making for other reasons. React is one of the good examples. Meta open sourced the framework that they use to build the Facebook and Instagram UI, user interface, and it became very popular, people love it, and then they get a bunch of things back. They get community goodwill, so in some ways it's advertising. They get a whole community developing and enhancing the user interface framework so that all of their tools benefit from these improvements that other coders that they're not even paying are getting. And then they also have a workforce talent pipeline that's just built in. They can just go hire from this contributor community, and really is a nice sort of perk on the top. But lots of companies like Google did this with Bigtable and HDFS, and there's this is just one of the most common models. Big companies, I think Netflix did this back in the day. So lots of companies have done this model. And one of the big advantages is that they pay, the companies did this, they had open source program offices, and they were very conscious about how they were gonna release it and make it public.
I think there's an 11th one. It's the outcompete model, where essentially a company will start up an open source, trying to get the understanding of the market, build that share, and then they let the open source go free and then build their commercial version and outcompete themselves effectively. That happens a lot.
Interesting.
Llama is probably my best example. It was not fully open source, it's kind of an open license use.
Open weights, it's not an open license.
Open weight. But basically the goal was to get a lot of user base to test and build, and expectation is one of the next versions of Llama or something like Llama will be fully commercialized, but they've accelerated their development cycle by letting a lot of people play with it and use it. Whereas OpenAI has done the exact opposite. They were supposed to be open and have full access, but they've restricted it to the point where very little is coming in for non-paid users.
I'm gonna jump into some of that now.
Sorry, that's just.
No, that's great, so yeah, this led me down this other rabbit hole. This is not my expertise at all, so I'm happy for anybody else to jump in. But I wanna talk about sort of the state of commercial open source. And let me just jump right in. So this is all from the Linux Foundation State of Commercial Open Source. So it's, the basic takeaway is it's doing very well. Commercial open source competes with commercial proprietary very, very well, especially when you're talking about venture capital and startups. They tend to succeed at higher rates, and so I'll spare you all of these details, but well, I'm not gonna spare you because I'm gonna go into a bunch of them. So yeah, you can see that over the last 25 years, a lot more open source venture deals, commercial open source deals have been happening, including 2024. It went up to over 250 deals, 400 deals, I think. So yeah, it's growing. It's becoming a kind of, I think what you're saying, it's a way to prove that you have a community and that you have value, and take away some of the risk from a venture capital perspective.
The investment basis for this has been reducing R&D costs by shifting it to an open source model, and it's been effective. However, there are diminishing returns as we start scaling here, because there's only so many open source coders who are willing to work on a commercial product.
Yeah.
So we will see a compensation change in the near future.
Here's some of the companies. This is, you can see the different verticals. Yeah, this is all this weird talk, industry talk. I think it's more venture capital talk. AI, data security, semiconductors, cloud tech, cybersecurity. So AI is obviously leading right now in venture capital. But and I was happy that the Linux Foundation did this report, was very aware of open weights not being true open source, and the muddiness of the open source AI world. Supabase, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later if I have time, is a really cool open source company that actually, as of the time of this slide, had $189 million funding round at a $2.5 billion valuation. And just this month, I think, they went up to a $5 billion valuation and got another $100 million of financing. So they're doing very well. Like, you can make real money with starting an open source company, but I think you have to be very savvy. You have to understand how to start a company, and you have to want to like play that game and make money and stuff. But it's doable. Yeah, backend, DevOps, core infrastructure, and then dev tools are like the most likely types of things to go open source over closed source, over proprietary. That's where venture capital and the companies tend to succeed.
Is that because maybe I'm stating the obvious, but because they're doing things where the metabolism, like the rate of change in the technology, like it's just so fast, the only way they can keep up that pace is by open sourcing their code so that they've just got more eyes on it and they can keep that momentum.
It's an R&D reduction, so R&D has a lock-in effect. Once you invest, you have to finish out that project. Whereas open source allows for quick drops and quick accept of new feature requests and that kind of stuff. So this with the crowd to some extent, but I think you've hit the nail on the head. Investors really like something that has a low R&D overhead. Means most of their money is not being spent on frivolous, exploration, which improves science but doesn't return. Open source moves much faster. The downfall is it also accelerates the timeline of competition. So the ROI, those ratios really become very muddied. So if you're not the first actor in a space, so you gain a time advantage, you're very unlikely to prove out. That's why we talk about AI bubbles right now, because there's heavy investment across a lot of AI companies which can't possibly all coexist.
I think another factor is the community building factor is that developers care about dev tools.
Right.
And so they'll like get passionate about it and contribute to it and grow that community and try to build the best thing. And so that may help. They care about the weeds and the infrastructure and all those kind of things. Whereas the like front end business app, they're not that key.
Right.
There's a lot of conversion, I think that's the term, where these companies, get funded by venture capital, but then actually have either an IPO or get bought by some other company. So that's in some ways the win. That's where you like the investors get their return.
And it's often the investment strategy. So the investor will give you money assuming within a certain amount of time you have an IPO or you do an M&A. So it is no longer this is your glide path, your exit strategy. This is the requirement. So you'll scale towards that goal, which causes no end of heartache in open source and other altruistic ventures.
12% doesn't seem like a high rate to me, but I guess it's pretty high for venture capitalists. So it's higher than the norm.
It's higher than probably any other industry because the failure rate is usually about 95% for companies.
Okay.
And that's why most venture capital raises are pretty small or take high percentage of the company valuation.
There's a couple companies that are popping up too that just do venture capital companies that just specialize in open source. I know Chinstrap is one of them. It's pretty cool. Companies have better valuations. This I think is interesting. These are some of the factors that help distinguish the commercial open source companies that are going to have success. Some of the community health findings, basically. There's an open secure software foundation criticality score, and that is made up of a lot of different things. One of the things that they do is they actually have tools called a scorecard dev tool that helps any open source application find any security weaknesses. And so tools that are more secure are going to do better, and two, tools that are more critical, that are more people depend on are going to do better. But there's a bunch of different health things. So if you have more distinct contributors, if you have more contributing organizations, more commit frequency, more dependent projects, those things are going to make you a stronger open source project.
Where's that from? I can't see behind you.
Sorry, that's also from that Linux Foundation thing. The link I put was the link to the tool that lets you do the open source. Sorry, the security scorecards, which has a tool which lets you evaluate any open source project for security risks. So the bottom line is community health equals financial health, which I really, really like. And also diversity is a key indicator of value in open source projects. And by diversity, I think they mean like more organizations, more contributors, not necessarily the race or gender, but I support that too. Let's see. Oop. This is just another way of saying kind of the same things, the most important factors when evaluating open source libraries. No, this is different. Yeah, so you can read it. I'm gonna kind of go quickly now. And this is from a different survey called Tide Lift. This is an old one from 2018. Here's a newer one. Oh, here, yeah, this is from more recent Tide Lift. Who's paying the maintainers? Nobody. So it's still a problem in my opinion. And it's too bad because when you do start funding these projects, like they can really grow and it just it really gets better. I think it's, I'm hoping that industry can realize if they just gave a 1%. I think Salesforce has this like 1%, 1%. Have you heard of this? Like 1% they give to charity, 1% of employees' time they get to do whatever they want or do towards charity. I don't know what the third 1% is, but like it's not very much, but it is, so that I like 1% could go to open source. It would make such a huge difference.
ETS did something similar when I worked there. There was one day a year where we were encouraged to go and volunteer somewhere and do something, be paid normal salary. A percentage of all the profits went to a charity chosen by the employees by a vote. And then there was a bonus that year based upon profitability that got split amongst all employees. Before you move on, really, really quick, there is a relatively strong push amongst European and a few other countries to actually have open source maintainers receive not a percentage, but essentially a flat rate for being the certain level of maintainer. So essentially you are either a gatekeeper, so you get paid for that work, or contributions above a certain level defined by the project itself get to payout. So think of it almost like a hackathon type model for maintaining. So you do something good, you get money back, and that incentivizes a lot more work and moves a lot of the attention towards a certain project and away from others that may not be as economically valuable. It's not necessarily sustainable, but it is something that's showing up more and more.
Yeah, I like that. I saw one chart I didn't include showed that Europe has more open source maintainers than the US right now. So I think Europe is really going all in on open source.
Governments are often ones funding that, so they put a certain amount of money into the pot to use the open source software, and that gets distributed by the maintainer to the maintainers.
Yeah, and they have a sovereignty tech fund that they're
invest in startups and new concepts that fulfill things that are currently commercial.
All right, this is just fun. So there's a big disconnect between the open source maintainer and then the projects and the companies that might fund them or support them or buy them. They start out really excited. Yeah, they started excited and then they kind of wander, and then they get excited again, and then they start to get like burnt out. And right when they're getting totally burnt out, the company is like, oh yeah, we want to use this project. And do they ever meet? No, often not. And one of the key things I want to highlight is that it takes a long time. Like the average is 3.4 years to go from like starting your project to launching a company. So it's a long journey. It's not for the faint of heart. Maintainers don't think this is easy. Good, best, better, best, open source. So this is from one of the venture capital open source companies, and I'm not going to go through all this, but this is recommendations for maintainers and projects on what they value most from those projects, which I thought some of it was interesting. They actually prefer to work with like individual founders of companies over universities or over a dedicated company.
There's a good reason for that.
Yeah. maybe they could take advantage of them.
Lower cost structure, so if the
Yeah,
individual who
yeah.
built it, you just have to pay the one person off.
Yeah,
If you've got a big team who's maintaining it, you have a lot higher cost.
yeah. And they obviously wanna work with the creators and the maintainers, not just the contributors, things like that. They wanna get to the source. And then the more contributors you have, the stronger you're considered as a project. That just makes sense. Bigger ecosystem, you've already got the buy-in, the community love. So circling back to the $1 trillion of Elon Musk, Frank Nagel is one of the authors of the paper, The Value of Open Source, and he is going to be one of our speakers at our keynote for the OSCON. And in the paper they they estimated the value to replace open source software at $8.8 trillion. So the paper came out last year. I think this is another reason it helped put open source on the map. People are like, wait, what? Okay, this is not something we can dismiss. This is real money. It would cost companies 3.5 times more if they had to replace all the open source software right now. So that's a lot of money that they're saving. So I want them to start giving that back to the open source projects, especially the critical ones, but we'll see. Working on that. I wanted to finish up with some quick stories. How am I doing on time? I'll do quick stories. So I mentor students from my college, and one of the students graduated a year and a half ago, and he asked me to look at his resume, and I looked at his resume, and he was excited about open source, and he started his own project, and he was just having no luck in the job search. He was really getting depressed, and I said, your resume looks great, just keep doing what you're doing. And he said, moving in with my parents so I could save money. So he moved into their basement, and he just started his own open source AI project. He started building his skills. He created a cool project that he was excited about, and he started connecting with different people because of the project and because of the community. He was solving real problems, working on real stuff, getting real experience. He put that on his resume and created his GitHub account and put that GitHub account on the resume. And he just got a job about 3 months ago, and he's really happy. So that's a long haul. It was over a year he was looking for a job and applying and having interviews and just having no luck. But I think open source while you're job hunting is a really good way to connect to people, to get experience, to have some purpose, to actually solve real world problems. And you can find almost anything, that fits your niche. So I highly recommend that.
Is he out of the basement?
He's out of the, I actually don't know if he's out of the basement. I mean, there's some perks to the basement. There's home cooking and, cheap rent or no rent. There's a lot of perks, so I don't know.
That can fade a little bit.
Exactly.
I want to add to that we've seen a lot of success for individual builders who go to the free conferences all around DC in particular. There's a lot of them every week, basically. There's one today, where basically you can go in and just talk to people face to face, explain what you did, give them access to your code base, and that's been a really high throughput for a lot of the data scientists we work with. They've done hackathons and done a little bit of work around it, showed it off, and that portfolio gets them the job. Whereas trying to get through the interview process just doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah, that's a great networking. And you prove yourself by coding and contributing to an open source
But
project.
you have to add that to in-person
Yeah.
interactions right now,
Yeah.
because everyone's got their own code base, so you have to explain why it's important to that person.
Yeah. So open source service companies, this is sort of another business model. It's one that I really, really like. It's companies that are saying they're aware of how vendor lock-in is just frustrating the heck out of governments and even other industries and companies, and academia. We get annoyed when there's some tool that isn't working well that we're paying a bunch for. So Nava is an open source company that's local. They've been around for 10 years. They have about 500 employees right now. what they do is they build tools for the government to help them with filling out forms and with approving forms and using AI to help approve forms, but having a human in the loop. I love Almost There. I'm like, I don't know why I'm advertising for this company, but I love them. Please be a sponsor, Nava. They are a great company with a great model, and they had an open source summit 2 weeks ago, and I talked to a bunch of their employees, and they just clearly love what they do. They're making a difference. They're making things like filling out your visa application easier and applying for healthcare easier. That's what they work on, and they're making it so it's all open source. And they recently launched this Strata tool, which is open source tools for government, so that any part of the government that has a form can use it and improve it. And somebody asked, "Aren't you worried about competitors?" And they said, "No, like if we have competitors, it'll make our tool better. That's fine." And what are they gonna do? Like they're gonna fork it and then charge for our thing that's free? Good luck. Like the whole point is the government's sick of the vendor lock-in. So they want to be able to have open source. They value that. And one of the employees I talked to had switched from Accenture to Nava. And I was like, "Really? Did you take a big pay cut?" She said, "No, I got a big pay raise." Because the government values this so much. They can save so much money by not paying for vendor lock-in, that they want the engineers and the people that know how to do this, that know how to host and integrate and make these tools and deliver them. And they're very human-centered focused, so they do a lot of research and studies on like how do you make a user interface intuitive so that people that have accessibility challenges or just basically the entire US population can use these tools and not get tripped up by them. So it's a really lovely model that I'm hoping will grow and grow and grow and grow.
Now, it has a secondary impact on government, specifically creating government paid employees in government to utilize Nava tools and basically liaison to make sure it works and go back and forth with the company. So it's literally created an entire class of jobs that didn't exist before. There aren't many yet, but we're gonna see a lot more.
All right.
Those European maintainers you talked about?
Yeah. Okay, lastly, I just want to talk about Supabase. I sat in on a webinar with the CEO, Paul Cobblestone, and he talked through kind of their open source model, and I really liked some of the things that they talked about. They chose open source for philosophical reasons, so I think that's really important. Like you have to believe in it. He said for them, he doesn't think the license actually is that important at the end of the day. That it's more important that you just focus on building a strong company. And then they actually have 3 different licenses. They use the Postgres license because they give back their contributors to Postgres because that's kind of their core. And then they have 2 other licenses. I can't remember what they are. Different open source licenses for their other tools. So yeah, he thinks it's not a huge consideration. So anyway, that's his perspective. I'm not sure. I was curious to hear that. He definitely echoes what you were saying, that building the open source community helps drive growth and helps scale, helps work out those kinks. He said something really interesting. Somebody asked him, "Are you worried about somebody forking your project and taking it over, like AWS or somebody?" And he said, "Well, you can't fork taste because their community that they're delivering to is developer community. Anybody that wants to build an app or build a tool that needs a database, and they don't want to manage the database themselves, they just want some easy way to host it or set it up or run it somewhere else, they make it really easy for a developer. They make it interoperable with their IDEs and their development tools, and so they just focus on like creating a great developer experience. And then like, good luck Amazon, good luck others that want to fork it, this is what we do. And we're working directly with the developers to make sure we get their feedback in all our design decisions. So we're confident that we will win in that perspective. Another interesting thing he said was don't charge for dev time, charge for running time. So that means people don't really want to care about paying for your developers and for adding new features. They just want to be able to host it on that site and not have to worry about it, and they'll pay for that runtime. So I thought that was interesting. let's see. Yeah, so last, I'm really done now, I promise. Open source can help you get a job. I think open source is a realistic path for starting and growing successful businesses. And then I just love open source. It's a great place to connect with great people and solve real problems. Yeah. Thank you.
You're going to visit OSCON too.
Yeah, in 5 minutes, I'm gonna do a lightning talk.
Yes.
With Mike, we'll do it together, dialogue lightning.
Open source your way to profitability.
Any questions from anybody online?
Just stop recording, I'll give you an idea about how Laser is thinking about creating an open source marketplace, making this work.